So if you're going to start a business, try and figure out how you're going to get the customer, because you could have the best idea in the world, and just because you've opened the doors or you've actually turned the website on doesn't mean to say that people are going to come to you and spend money at your place. The single biggest piece of advice I can give to anyone is,
this is the We Built This Business podcast. I'm your host, Daniel O'Sullivan. This is the podcast for UK business owners to share their journey, their knowledge, their sacrifices, and their successes. This podcast is sponsored by Team Building Experiences. If you're planning a team building event, away day, or corporate event, then check out team-building-experiences.co.uk and state podcast 15 in the comments to receive 15% off your proposal. Hello and welcome back to the We Built This Business podcast. Today, I'm pleased to have a very special guest, Ajaz Ahmed. Ajaz was the founder of FreeServe, which offered free internet access in 1998. FreeServe went from nothing to a 9 billion valuation in just over 2 years, and with over 2.5 million active users, was sold for £1.6 billion in the year 2001. I'm really looking forward to hearing how FreeServe was built and exited, but also what Ajaz has been up to since the sale. Ajaz, welcome to the podcast.
it's a pleasure.
Thanks for coming on. Really looking forward to hearing all of what you've been up to. Now, with regards to the beginning, Ajaz, you started at Dixons. How did you come around working at Dixons, and what were you like at school? Were you a bit of an entrepreneurial kid?
Well, when I was at school, I actually failed all my exams. I left school with absolutely nothing. But one of the things that sort of motivated me was an advert that I saw on television when I was still at school. And the advert was for Hovis bread. And you're probably wondering how a bread advert can motivate anyone. And in this advert, many of the older people remember it. There's an old guy, and he stops at the gates of the mill, and he's got a clock under his arm, and he's obviously just retired. And they've given him a clock, and he turns around and looks at the mill for one last time, which is probably where he's worked most of his life. And he walks home on the cobbled streets, and then he sits in front of the fire and eats his Hovis bread, and the advert finishes, "Hovis good today as it's always been." And when I saw that advert, I thought, oh my God, that man has spent his entire life working in that mill, and what's he got to show for it? A clock. And the more I thought about it, I thought in reality, thousands and thousands of people are retiring every single day, and they sit back and think about their life, about all the things they could have done, should have done, and would have done. But it's too late then. It's far too late. So I was motivated to actually achieve something in life. But I actually failed all my exams, and I was walking past Dixons, who were called Dixons Photographic at the time, and I saw this advert in the window looking for a junior salesperson. So I applied. And I started off as a junior salesperson in Dixons when I was 16 years old at £30 a week. So that's how I got into Dixons.
Wow. And what year would have that been?
That was 1979.
1979. Okay. So we're still quite far away from 98 at this point. So how long did you work at Dixons before you came up with the initial idea for FreeServe?
Yeah, so I worked, I've only had two employers, believe it or not, Dixons and FreeServe, which is quite strange. So I started in Dixons, and then Dixons changed very quickly from Dixons Photographic. They started to sell things like TVs and video recorders, and then they sold home computers, which nobody had a home computer at the time. And again, for the older people, they remember things like the Amstrad and the Sinclair Spectrum and the BBC Model B, and the world went crazy with buying computers. And then we started to sell the bigger computers, something like the Amstrad 1512, and they were on DOS at the time. And then the world seemed to just change. And then Dixons bought another company called Currys, and the reason they bought Currys was because they sold white goods, washing machines and fridges. But I became a manager of a Dixons store, and I did very, very well, actually. Within a year, I actually became the manager of the largest turnover store in the north of England, which was Manchester Arndale Centre. And it was while I was at the Arndale Centre store, we got a memo, and the memo said that we've just bought a small company. They've got 4 stores around the M25 called PC World, and PC World was the future. And I remember folding up the memo because there's no emails in those days, and I thought that's where I'm going to go. So I applied and became a manager of the first store north of London, which was Leeds. And so I went to the Leeds store, and it was amazing. Everyone wanted to buy a computer. Nobody had a computer for business or for home, and it changed the world. It really was a fantastic experience. Everyone wanted to buy a computer.
My first computer was an Amiga 500. I think that was the early 90s. I think it was 91, 92. And I remember my parents going into a shop. I think it was in Oxford, because we're Oxford based, and they were like, we're going to buy this personal computer. And it was huge. I mean, it wasn't like a small thing. And I was just absolutely hooked.
It's a lot of money as well.
It was a lot of money. I remember it being something that my friends would come over to mine, and we'd all literally play on the Amiga, and they'd never seen anything like it before. It was very, very special. But there was no internet. That's the thing. It was purely MS-DOS. It was games related to floppy disks. Half of them didn't save, so you had to keep the computer running for days sometimes to actually enjoy going to different levels. So you're now at PC World. You're in the Leeds store. The internet isn't really around yet. And what was your kind of interest in the PC and internet market? Did you have any personal interest in yourself? Or was it just from working in the store that you got that?
Oh, it was just from working in the store, and I sort of figured out that PCs were the future. Very few people had a personal computer. Very few businesses had a personal computer, and this small little company called Microsoft were buying up other companies. There was a company called Lotus 123, and that was a spreadsheet. So they bought Lotus 123, and then there was another one doing word processor. And they were slowly assembling what it was now something that everyone uses, which is Microsoft 365, the Microsoft Office, which everyone used. You can't live without Microsoft Office now. And then there was one day in 1995, we all got these T-shirts that said, "I was there at the start." And they launched Microsoft Windows and Windows 95. And the reason it said I was at the start was because we opened till midnight. People queued till midnight to buy Windows 95. And the reason it said I was at the start was that was the first operating system at the start button, which again we now take for granted. And that really changed the world. And Windows 95, I think people, when they look back now, is such a transformative thing. And all sorts of software then started to be sold to be used on Windows 95, and that's the reason why people queued till midnight, because it was such an amazing experience.
Yeah, and Windows 95, it was essentially brought everything together in one area, didn't it?
Right,
so instead of previously you had to, if you wanted to use anything on a computer, you pretty much had to put a floppy disk in, and 95 enabled you to just open the computer like we do now.
Yeah, you press the start button and there was a list of things that you could do, whereas before it was all over the place. It changed the world in Windows 95.
So how do you then go to setting up FreeServe, or coming up with the idea for FreeServe? Where did that come from?
Well, so I bought myself an IBM computer because I didn't have a PC at the time. I bought an IBM computer. And I'd heard about this thing called the internet. And I thought, I want to get on the internet. And I bought myself a modem. And then I asked the staff in my own shop, how do you get onto the internet? And people said, don't know. It was quite frustrating. Nobody could tell me how to get onto the internet. And then eventually I found someone in our technical center. And I said, listen, mate, I want to go on the internet. What do I do? And he said, I've heard of this company called Demon Internet. And they're quite good. I thought, right, okay. So I phoned up Demon Internet, and I said to the guy there, I want to go on the internet. What do I need? And he said, you need a browser. I said, right, okay, how do I get a browser? He said, you can FTP it from our site. And I thought, what the bloody hell's an FTP? And I now know it stands for File Transfer Protocol, which means you can download the browser. But what it means is you have to be on the internet to be able to download it. And I wasn't on the internet, and I had no idea what FTP stood for. So I eventually managed to get a CD from a magazine cover for a company called CompuServe, which were the second biggest internet company, second biggest ISP in the world, actually. It was an American company, the largest being AOL, which stands for America Online. And when I got onto CompuServe, when I got home, I thought, wow, this is the future. In the future, everyone is going to want to get on the internet. And I started thinking about my experience. And I thought, well, if we can't tell people how to get on the internet, then every single day, thousands and thousands of people must be asking us up and down the country in Dixons, in Currys, in PC World, and we say we don't know. And I thought, if we become the ISP, we'll be able to do something that nobody else can do. We can get to the customer first. We don't have to spend money on acquiring the customer. We don't have to spend any money on putting CDs on magazine covers. We can just pile up our CDs, and people can just come into the store and just pick one up. And every time we sell a computer, we can say to the customer, listen, you need internet access, here you go. And I thought, we can get the CDs and we can have the browser on there. You don't need to FTP it. You put the CD in there and it will install the browser for you. And I thought, wow, it's simple. And for those of you who, I bet you remember this is the CD.
Yeah. No, I remember the yellow, particularly on the front of a magazine that I would usually pick up PC magazines when I was about 15.
Well, so we didn't put them on magazine covers. We actually piled them in the stores, and because we had 1,000 shops up and down the country, it meant we didn't have to pay anybody, and that's really the secret. And I thought to myself, we don't have to spend any money or inquiring customers. They're already in our shops, and that's the difference between us and everyone else. We don't have to spend any money on acquiring customers. And I thought that's really the biggest reason why FreeServe was so successful, because we acquired the customers very, very easily and without spending any money. And I thought, most days Dixons advertised in the newspapers, Dixons, Currys, PC World. They're in the newspapers already. And if we put a small little box in every advert, we'll be able to, again, communicate with the customers and we don't have to spend any money, acquiring the customer. So we'll be in the national press for free. So I went to see the managing director of PC World, and I told him about my idea. I said, listen, we can get to the customer first. And at the moment, someone else is making money from our customers. We're selling the computers, and then we're letting someone else make the money from our customers because they're going to the different ISPs that exist out there. And if we become the ISP, we'll be able to get to the customer first. And I also said to him, we can also have a portal. We can make sure in the browser, the home address is our portal, and then people will be able to do a search on there. They'll be able to buy things from the shopping channels. So we'll also make money from the portal as well. So, and I told him about my idea, and you can imagine what he said. No. He said, let's just focus on opening more PC worlds. Let's just do that. And probably the reason is because he didn't get it. He probably didn't use the internet himself because nobody was on the internet, and he didn't understand what we were doing.
So he just completely flat out was like, it's not for me. And I suppose if he doesn't, like you said, if he doesn't use the internet, he doesn't see the potential, then the potential is all in opening more PC World shops, because everyone at the moment is trying to come in and buy computers.
Absolutely. And since then, when I give talks, I call this garlic bread syndrome. And garlic bread syndrome is based on Peter Kay's famous garlic bread joke, which is, boss, I've seen the future. It's garlic bread. Everyone's going to eat it. And his boss said, let's get this right. Are you saying that people are going to eat bread with garlic on it? garlic bread. No, I don't think so. I'm not having that. But now if you think about it, we're all eating garlic bread. And you can imagine 50, 60 years ago, someone actually saying to their boss, listen, boss, we should be selling garlic bread. And he didn't get it. He probably turned him down. And that's the same. Sometimes obvious ideas are obvious now. And so I almost gave up. But the reason I carried on was because I read this magazine called Vanity Fair, which is an American magazine. And they managed to get a group of people together and they called them the New Establishment. And they were the people that controlled media and content. And they managed to get people like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and people like that. And there was a guy talking about Ted Turner. And Ted Turner was the guy who started the first 24-hour news channel, CNN. And this guy said, what people like Ted are required to do is do the obvious before it becomes obvious to everyone else. Because by the time it becomes obvious to everyone else, it's too late because people like Ted have done it and the other guys haven't. I mean, what possible reason did Ted have for starting a 24-hour news channel? It just blows your mind. And if you think about it, we now know it's not about watching news 24 hours a day. It's about watching news when you want to watch it. And we turn to 24-hour news channel if something happens in the world. And I thought to myself, just because this guy said no, it doesn't mean to say it's a bad idea. It just means that he didn't get it. And I need to persevere with it.
So you did you have to go to someone else? Because obviously this is like you said, the managing director of PC World. And I guess they were part of the bigger group, which was Dixons.
Yeah, they're part of a bigger group. It was actually called Dixons Stores Group. And Dixons Stores Group was all the companies, Dixons, Currys, PC World. So I managed, after a lot of persuasion, to get through to the group CEO of Dixons. And I went to the boardroom to see him with a couple of other people that were sat there, as well as his business development department. And I told him about my idea, and he said, you know what, I've got no idea if this is going to work, but we have to give it a go, so let's do it. So at 11 a.m. on the 22nd of September, Dixons launched FreeServe in the Financial Times building in London. And you could tell straight away, the journalists in the room, they thought it was fantastic. And the news, BBC News, went to see AOL and asked them, what do you think about this small little company that's just opened, FreeServe? And the guy said, you know what, it's not going to work. It's not what people want. People want things like AOL. And within 3 months, he was gone. And we were the largest ISP in the country.
Can I just dial back a little bit on this conversation you had with the Dixons CEO? Were you at all concerned that he might just take the idea and run with it, and just Dixons would, almost cut you out? Did you have to provide like an NDA or anything for them, or how did it work out?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. That I think when someone now goes to, it's quite annoying actually when people approach me, and I'm not going to tell you about the idea until you sign an NDA. And you've got to have a little bit of, you've got to be able to tell people what the idea is. I mean, Dixons is a big company, and they're not the sort of company that's going to nick your idea. The thought never occurred to me. At the time, I didn't even know what an NDA was, actually. No, the thought never occurred to me. They're not. I think bigger companies aren't the sort of people that would nick ideas. One-man bands might do. But I never even thought about that, actually. You're the first person to actually ask me that, believe it or not. Yeah.
I think I was speaking to a guy on an earlier episode called The Grumpy Entrepreneur, and he says it's one of his biggest bugbears that people are always coming to him and saying they've got a fantastic business idea, and all you need to do is sign this 50-page NDA and I'll tell you all about it. He says it really upsets him.
I'll tell you one thing. One of the lessons that I've learned is that, and I call it ugly baby syndrome. You've got a couple that's just had a baby, and they're in love with that baby. And then you go to look at the baby, and when you get there, you think, oh shit, that's an ugly baby, isn't it? And what do? Do you tell them the truth? Or do you go, that's really cute, that? Well, in business, you've got to tell them the truth. And most ideas that people come to me with are actually awful. But they've never actually asked anybody who hasn't got a vested interest, what do you think of this? So everyone that's got a vested interest, the parents or the friends, will end up saying, that's a great idea, that. But most ideas are actually crap.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? You have to fail numerous times before you come up with something that works. A lot of the time.
Yeah.
A lot of the time. So
yeah, you do. Everything's like FreeServe, which was a success on the first day.
So FreeServe. So for those that don't know, it sounds like it's free internet. Now, if you're probably 30 or less, you won't have used it effectively. But from what I remember, you got access, obviously, to their FreeServe browser. You also got a web space. So you're one of the first to provide like an actual space to put your website on, and an email address. Was those the kind of unique selling points that really took FreeServe into the marketplace and basically took over the competition?
Well, no, actually, it's much simpler than that. A1 and CompuServe, I think, charge $17.99 a month. Plus, you had to pay for the phone call as well, because in those days there was no broadband. You had to pay for the local rate phone call, and they were charging $17.99 a month. And FreeServe was just free. You just had to pay for the phone call, and that's it. And the other big difference, and the reason why FreeServe was so successful, was because AOL and CompuServe were a walled garden. You could only do something within their space. That's it. It's a bit like Sky now. With Sky, you can only look at what's on their box, and that's it. If someone said to you, I've seen this great music channel in South Africa, you can't look at it because it's not on their box. Whereas with the internet, you can just type in, South African music, and you can find it. And that was the big difference. People all of a sudden had the freedom to be able to go wherever they wanted to, and they didn't have to pay a monthly fee. And there was no contract to sign because of that. And so if you went on there and you liked it, carry on using it. If you don't like it, stop using it. It was as simple as that. And we gave away an email address and also web space because there were other people doing what we did. And we wanted to call ourselves the first, ISP that had everything. And most people want to use the web space, but they certainly use the email address. It was a great success because of the fact that we had a number of features, and the customer didn't have to mess around with signing contracts or setting up a direct debit. And that was a thing that made it different. So the fact that people could just walk into the stores and pick up the CDs, and the fact that people could get onto the internet easily, was the main reason why FreeServe was so successful. And I don't know this for a fact, but if FreeServe hadn't have come along, we might still be in a world where the largest ISPs are still walled gardens. And because the internet was an accident thing. The guy who came up with the browser, he didn't intend it to be the tool that it is now. It was actually designed for research with CERN, who were the atom collider within Switzerland and France. And he came up with this idea to have a browser so that universities around the world can communicate with each other. And it just so happens now it's a tool that allows you to not only communicate, but look at things and companies all over the world. So if FreeServe hadn't have come along, we might be in a world where we've got all these ISPs using walled gardens. But the fact that FreeServe offered the browser on a CD then meant that Microsoft also saw what we were doing, and then they started to bundle the browser with Windows as well. So it just made it easy for people. Then all over the world, people start to go on the internet using the browser.
Incredible. I remember the first time that I saw an advert on the television, and it had a www name after it. And I remember excitedly going to my parents, the internet's taking off, and they didn't know what I was on about, to be honest. But they soon did, because I remember when we were driving into like, I think Swindon was our local PC world, and we'd collect a FreeServe disk before we'd head off into the shops often, so that we had the internet for the week effectively.
Yeah. I mean, it was nice, by the way, when I drove in a car and I saw a plumber drive past, it had the FreeServe email address on there. It was a great feeling, and that normal people were using the internet.
So how did FreeServe actually make money?
Yeah, that's a very good question. How do you make money? By giving it away? Well, it was a quirk of the actual way that BT was privatized. So everyone in the country had a BT phone line. And when British Telecom were actually privatized, the deal was that BT have to share the revenue. So when a call starts on one network and terminates on another, BT have to share that revenue. And we were a network, essentially. So when you dial that local number and you were on the phone for, let's say a penny a minute on the weekends, we got a fraction of a penny from every minute. And we were sometimes doing more than £2 billion a month. So a fraction of a penny adds up to an awful lot of money. So some months we were doing a billion minutes, others were doing 1.5 billion, and then also the portal. I also figured out at the beginning that if we make freeserve.com the homepage for the portal, very few people are actually going to ever change it. Some people would have done. Someone like yourself who was a bit more techy might change it, but most people are not going to change it. So every time they log on, they see the portal. And just from the search engine alone, we were making £2.5 million. And from the shopping channel, we were making an awful lot of money as well. People would come to me and say, I want to be on the shopping channel. And I'd say, okay, I want £200,000 and I want 10% of the revenue. And it was great. It was a license to print money almost.
So you controlled essentially what Google do now, which is where people go online, isn't it? And that is the monetary side of it is all wrapped up into that, as well as the back end where you were getting a fraction of a penny as well. Amazing. I didn't.
Yeah. So we didn't have to spend the money on acquiring the customer, and then when we did acquire the customer, they were spending money with us. So it was great.
So the sale, how did the sale come about? Was it something that was always in the plan?
Yeah, I think one of the things that people need to understand is because we were part of Dixons, it was so much easier to run the business. A couple of years earlier, I was a shop manager, and now all of a sudden I'm part of this, big, enormous company. And there's no way I would have been able to do it without the might of a big corporate behind it. They were able to take care of everything. So 9 months after we launched, we were still part of Dixons. And then Dixons decided they wanted to separate the business and float it. And they floated on the stock exchange in London and also on the NASDAQ in New York. The initial price was £1.5 billion. And that's when I actually got shares in the business. Before that, I was just an employee of Dixons. So I got shares in FreeServe, and the share price just carried on going up every day. It went up and up and up and up. And at one point, we were actually worth £9 billion. We were worth more than our parent company, Dixons, who were turning over an awful lot of money and making an awful lot of money from the sales of all the things that they sold. And we actually became a FTSE 100 company. It was amazing. But I learned a very important lesson, which is, there was one day I made £1 million, which is an awful lot of money because the share price went up so much. But then the share price went down as well because the dot-com boom had finished. And the lesson is really, you're not a millionaire until you've sold it, you've paid the tax, and the money's in the bank. So that day when I made £1 million, I couldn't spend it. It was just a paper price that I could look at. I used to look at my computer and say, look at how much money I'd made, but it wasn't in my bank. So, when you've got a business and you think you're doing well and it's worth millions of pounds, it's not until you've actually sold it, paid the tax, and the money's in the bank and you're able to spend it. So don't get too excited with a business that you think is worth an awful lot of money until you've sold it.
It's really good advice, because often paper money is, it's not easy to turn it into real money unless
Yeah.
someone's actually acquires a business. Even if people are saying, oh, the business is worth X, business is worth Y, until it's actually sold and the money, like you said, is in your bank account, it's not worth anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, some businesses are actually very difficult to sell as well.
Yeah. Now, the sale, did that result in you completely leaving FreeServe, or did you still stay in the business for a number of years afterwards?
Yeah. So when, again, because Dixons were the majority shareholder and they're a big company, they were able to sort of decide when they wanted to sell the business and actually managing the transaction as well. So we almost sold it to another European phone company for £6 billion. And that deal fell through, unfortunately. And in the end, we sold it to France Telecom for £1.6 billion. And that was, within 3 years of launching the business. So it was phenomenal. So one of the mistakes that I made was I saw all this money and I left the business. I should have probably stayed on for another year or so, and I could have still spent the money that I made from the shares, selling the shares, and my life might have gone in a different direction. So anyway, I left the business. I decided to leave and start, doing things with the money.
Did you get any seller's remorse?
No.
I mean, it's a big number. I don't think I would either.
Yeah. Because, as I said, the dot-com, we were probably responsible for the start of the dot-com boom in this country, because all of a sudden there was a marketplace for companies to start selling products, whereas before there was no marketplace. An extra 2.5 million people on something called the internet, and you were able to start companies, start selling things, and then float businesses. That was the dream of everyone, floating it on the stock exchange. And then the crash happened, and so the price started going down. So from going from 9 billion to 1.6 billion, although it's a big number, no, I don't think I had any remorse in selling it. But I didn't have a choice anyway, because the majority shareholder, which was Dixons, they were the ones that decided when to sell the business. So I think it would have been great if the deal for 6 billion would have gone through, but no, in the end, I was quite happy. Selling the business and leaving it.
Yeah, I mean, within 3 years of setting up, it is a real achievement to sell for such a large sum as well. Since FreeServe, what have you learned since leaving FreeServe, Ajaz?
Well, I've learned an awful lot. One of the most important things that I've learned when reflecting on FreeServe and also since then is no one cares about you, right? If people think that people care about them in business, they don't. So don't be under the false impression that everyone has your best interests at heart, because they don't. They only think about themselves, and whatever is best for them, that's what they think about. Also, I invested in businesses as well, which all of them didn't work out. And I learned that, you've got this formula, which is, let's say you put £50,000 into a business and it's not going well. You're more inclined to put another 50,000 in to protect the 50,000 you've already put in there. And then that's not going well. So you put another 50,000 in, and now all of a sudden you've got 100,000 invested in that business. And you think, oh shit, I need to put another 50 grand in to protect that 100,000 you've got. When what you should do is, with the first 50,000 you put in, it's not working, you just say, right, I'm going to walk away. But people don't. They keep on putting money in there. So I've learned that to walk away, and that's it. And I'm only going to invest money in a business where I can be actively involved, so that I can sort of help with the direction of the business. I'm not going to give someone a sum of money and let them run the business. So unless I've got that actual running of the business and I can control what's happening, I'm not going to invest in any money as well. So those are just some of the lessons I've learned. But there's lots of other things as well that I already knew, and that I always use in any company that I help. One of the things I say to people is learn retail, because I'm a shopkeeper, really. I don't mind calling that myself that. I'm a shopkeeper. I'm a retailer, and retailers are some of the best people to understand how to actually get people to part with money. And when someone asks me to help them, all I do is use retail principles to actually turn their business around. And one of the things I tell people is that they should go into a supermarket and not buy anything. And if they walk around looking at how brands communicate, how brands actually get people to part with money, you can then use the same principles in your business as well. And if you do that and look at all these brands and how they communicate with you, you'll learn all sorts of things. You'll figure out why when you go to the supermarket, you end up buying things that you didn't intend to buy. Why you end up at the end of the month throwing food away that you didn't actually eat, that you spent money on. And one of the most important things is learn psychology. Branding and communication is all about psychology. And there's so many businesses that I wish I could knock on their door and say, listen, mate, I'd love to help you. You're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong. But they're not going to listen, so there's no point of doing that. But learn psychology. Big brands understand psychology and how to get the message across to people. I've seen the latest McDonald's advert, and it only says three things. That's it. It's got 3 M's on it. And yeah, and that's it. It could lead on to McDonald's. But you actually notice it straight away, and you'll probably see it now when you walk past some of the billboards and whatever. And it may sound stupid, but that's how brands get you to part with money. So if you've got a business, think about psychology, and you can learn psychology, you can learn retailing, and no one's going to teach you something. You've got to learn it yourself. And we're now, because of the power of the internet, we've got the best free university out there, which is YouTube. You can learn anything on YouTube, absolutely anything. Just sit back and watch someone talking. Don't watch people that just talk about themselves. Watch videos that are teaching you something that you can use in your own business and apply it to your business. And the internet has gone from what FreeServe was, which is something where there was no content out there, no video, to a thing now where you can use your phone, your iPad, your computer. You can do absolutely everything with it. Whenever you need some help and advice, you can get it from the internet. It's fantastic.
It is. I think the internet, is still got more to obviously give, but it's at a point now where it's evolving faster than ever before, probably down to AI. The amount of content that's going out, in video and audio, and the learnings that are being distributed through it as well is just absolutely incredible.
Well, just the fact that we're able to do this, and you're in the south of the country, I'm in Yorkshire, it's fantastic, isn't it? I could be in another country, it wouldn't have made a difference. It's phenomenal. It really
I think before the pandemic as well, it's if we wanted to meet with a supplier or we wanted to meet with someone that we hadn't worked with before, it was polite to go and see them in person. Whereas now, it's much more accepted to jump on a video call and be able to, interact and communicate with that person and build a relationship virtually without it
Absolutely. I'm the chairman of a business called Cuba, QUBA, and we build very, very, very big websites. Websites that cost a lot of money. Very technical websites. So we've got a couple of airports, for instance, with insurance companies. That sort of thing. So it's not easy to build something like that. Before COVID, you're absolutely right. If someone had called us and said, "I'm interested in a website being built," we would have sent someone there. We'd have sent 2 or 3 people there to see them. If we'd have said, "Let's have a call on Teams," they would have said, "That's not polite, is it? I want to spend all this money and you can't be even bothered to come and see me." Whereas now it's just accepted talking to people over the internet. Teams, Microsoft Teams, is a tool that lots of big companies use by default. And COVID has changed the world, and there's an awful lot of companies out there that haven't got an office anymore. When I go to the train station in Leeds, where I spend a lot of time, on a Monday and Friday, it is actually quieter than it used to be because there's more people working from home on those days. And there's a lot more empty buildings now because people are working from home. So, and that's just the beginning. In the future, there's going to be other things that are happening that we couldn't even predict now.
Yeah, just everything changes so fast, doesn't it? That's the thing. And before, a bit like with the internet as well, before you even know what's happened, it's changed. And you're then almost struggling to keep up. Just wanted to go back to the retail part that you were talking about. So one thing that's always interested me, and I don't know the psychology behind it, but it's the middle aisle at Aldi and Lidl. What's the psychology behind that? Because I end up always buying something from it.
Right. Okay. Well, I don't, believe it or not, I don't shop at Aldi and Lidl. I do go in, and I understand the psychology that they use. They've got, let's say, cereal that looks like a bigger brand, but it's not. So that they're copying. They're getting people to think that they're buying a Kellogg's or Nestle product, and it's not. And the middle aisle is, when they can buy things, for a deal, a bargain, they buy them, and then it's an impulse buy. People are walking around like yourself, and they just pick it up. The chances of some of those products being available a couple of months later is very small. So whenever they can buy something that's a good deal, they buy it. And it's an impulse buy, actually. Supermarkets in general, they're very, very good with psychology. And that's why, as I said to you, people buy things that they didn't intend to buy. When you go to a supermarket, you don't realize that the end cap at the end, people actually pay for their products to be on there. When you're walking down the aisle, people actually pay to be at eye level, and things like that. And websites can also learn from things like that. It annoys me when I look at a website and I have to scroll down. It's below the fold, as it's called, the technical term. And if you want someone to buy something or you want to communicate with someone, it should be above the fold. So you don't have to scroll down, because the chances are no one's going to scroll down. The way that the language that's used, the language that people use on most websites is awful. It really is. If you go down to the supermarket and look at Kellogg's Bran Flakes, for instance, it says it's good for your gut. That's it. It's good for your gut, right? You don't need to think about the benefits of Bran Flakes, do you? It's good for your gut, right? Because people haven't got the time to stop and read things. And it's the same with most people's websites. People don't have the time to read things. So you need to keep it as short as possible, but make sure you get the message across in a few words. And it's very hard to do that. I write things on LinkedIn, and I make sure it's a short post, very, very short. And if you can't get the message across within the first line, chances of people going to the second line is small, But if the first line is interesting, then they'll go to the second, third, and fourth line. That's what retail teaches you. You've got to be able to get the message across in a quicker way as possible.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite retailer?
Well, yeah, I do. My favorite retailer actually is IKEA. It's enormous.
I've been lost in there a few times.
Yeah, it's enormous. But again, if you walk around and observe things, they're very clever retailers. And when we opened the Leeds office of FreeServe, which was the first office, I actually went to IKEA and bought all the furniture from IKEA. And when it was our 20th anniversary, I went back to the office and I knocked on the door and I said, "Excuse me," I told them who I was. And I said, "Can I just walk around the office?" And they said, "Yeah, no problem." And it was a charity then. And I noticed that all the furniture was still there, the furniture that I'd bought, the floor, the desks, the chairs. It's a great retailer. Lots of people all over the world buy IKEA furniture. The retailer with the largest sales per square foot in the world is actually Apple. It's an amazing business, and they don't have any clutter or anything like that, and you can find what you want quickly. It's the same with the website. You should be able to find what you want in a quick way. My favorite website is actually gov.uk.
Okay.
Believe it or not, we've all used it, and they've got millions of pages on there, but you're going to be able to find everything within 3 clicks.
Yeah, I've been on there many times, I must admit, and I'm usually searching for information and end up having to look in the FAQs or try and find the information elsewhere. But it is very, very straight to the point. There's no fluff, is there, with it?
It's not. And my favorite e-commerce site, excluding Amazon and eBay, the British e-commerce site is actually Screwfix.
Oh yeah.
Now that I've told that, next time you look at it, you'll understand why it's so easy to use. It's easy to find what you want. Just like gov.uk, it's so easy to find what you want.
Yeah, I've bought quite a lot from Screwfix, I must admit, because we've just recently had a renovation done, so I've been there a few times. And I've bought a lot on their website. And the thing now is it's all done on the phone, isn't it, as well? Everything's on an app.
You can do all sorts. And also people like, I bought something from eBay the other day, and the Royal Mail website is fantastic. It tells you where your product is, your parcel is, should I say, when it's going to arrive. It's just phenomenal. And it's not easy to build websites like that. There's an awful lot of technology that goes into it, and the user doesn't think about the technology, and they don't need to think about the technology. The only thing they need to think about is, when's my parcel going to be here? The same with Screwfix. They don't need to think how it's designed. It just needs to be easy for you to buy it. And people's websites, company websites, that's all they need to be. And unfortunately, the majority of websites out there are awful.
They're trying to be too clever, though, aren't they? They're trying to be too jazzy, is the word I'd use.
Yeah, but they've not thought about. Most people who build websites, by the way, have not been taught psychology or anything like that. They know how to use WordPress or something, and that's it. They don't know how to write copywriting. They don't know about psychology. They don't. I mean, one of the things that always annoys me is when you look at a website. A lot of websites, the actual text is wide. The columns, right? When we actually read things, we actually read them like that, a zigzag way, and it needs to be narrow. Again, if you look at Screwfix or gov.uk or the BBC websites, the columns are very narrow, so you can read it very easy because you just scan text. And next time you read a newspaper, you'll see the columns are very narrow because you can scan them. And that's psychology that people need to understand, and they don't. So you end up giving up when it's wide.
I've never thought about that before, but yeah, newspaper columns just makes complete sense, because otherwise you just have huge columns, wouldn't you?
Your eyes would give up.
Yeah.
You'd give up doing that. And there's so much psychology that big websites use that small websites don't. But one of the things that I tell people is nick ideas. If the BBC is using narrow columns, then you can use narrow columns. If the BBC or the government websites, if they're doing something that makes sense, then you can do it. I mean, the government, by the way, actually issue their brand guidelines and how they actually come up with the design. It's publicly available out there. The psychology it's all out there, and you can use their hard work that they've done and put it to good use. You can look at Screwfix and see how they do things, and you can copy the way they do things as well.
Yeah, no, it's a very good tip. I'm a big fan of looking at what others do, especially if you're new to that market. And I like to obviously put our own spin on things, but it's definitely the best way to come up with your original concept and to learn from what others have learned from their mistakes, essentially, and how they've got to where they've come. One thing I wanted to ask you is, what's the story behind? So you were awarded a British Empire Medal, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. One day I received something through the post. It was a brown envelope, and I thought, bloody hell, it's something from the tax office, and my mother and my wife were in the room. And when I opened it, it was from the Prime Minister's office saying that we're recommending you for a British Empire Medal. And we want to know that if we do that, are you going to accept it? Because some people won't accept anything from the government or the Queen, as it was at the time. And when I read it, I thought, wow. And I felt so proud. And it said that you can't tell anyone either, right, until, when it's been announced. But my mum was in the room, my wife's in the room, and I couldn't help myself. And I told them but I told them, don't tell anyone, and they didn't actually tell anyone. And it was such a great feeling to get a British Empire Medal from the Queen. It really was. And I'd already met the Queen before. I'd already met Prince Charles on a number of occasions. And, the Queen wrote to me and Prince Charles wrote to me, congratulating me as well. And it was such it was a great feeling. I'm on the governing council at the University of Huddersfield as well, where I live. And, to consider that I left school with no qualifications, I'm really proud of the fact that I'm on the governing council of a university, that the fact that I've got a British Empire Medal, and it gives me, great pride being able to do that as well.
That's fantastic. And did you get to speak to the Queen as well? Did you say any words to her?
Oh, as I said, I'd already met her. So, I'd already met Prince Charles as well. I've met Prince Charles 5 times. I met the Queen a couple of times. So, yes, the Queen, by the way, is the only person I've met. Everybody from the President of the United States to Prime Ministers to, famous people. And, they're just all normal people, including Prince Charles, as it was at the time. They're just normal people, but the Queen was the only person I've ever met that had this aura about her. And you wouldn't dare start a conversation unless she actually asked you something. It was an amazing feeling talking to the Queen. It really was. Everyone else, just a normal person.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I've not met anyone famous really like that, I don't think. And I can imagine you must have been a little bit nervous as well.
Yeah. She actually asked me about FreeServe because I was introduced as the founder of this big internet company, and she started asking about that.
I wonder if she was on FreeServe back in 1998. You never know.
I don't know. Yeah. Well, I don't know actually, but I've got the feeling that she was the sort of person that was a paper person at the time.
Yeah. Lovely.
Yeah.
So, Ajaz, could you give us some advice for anyone looking to start a business up in 2024?
Well, first of all, it's got to be a good idea. Sounds obvious, doesn't it? But people still to this day come to me with rubbish ideas. And the only way of we have to sort of clarify whether it's a good idea or not is to ask people that haven't got vested interest. But unfortunately, one of the problems that everyone has is they have what they call confirmation bias. And confirmation bias, I suffer from it, you suffer from it, everyone does. And it's difficult to be able to step back and look at things properly. Confirmation bias is you start off with a bias and you come up with words to confirm your bias. Oh no, that's not going to work. No. Oh no, it's not what people want. And you've got to be able to step back and look at something from the customer's perspective, using empathy. So is it a good idea? Is it genuinely a good idea? And then raising money is very, very hard. Getting the business off the ground. I wrote a post on LinkedIn a few weeks ago, just 3 paragraphs long, and it said, what's the biggest reason why businesses fail? And it's because the single biggest reason why businesses fail is they've underestimated the difficulty or the cost of acquiring new customers. And that's it. Single biggest reason why. So if you're a startup or you're looking to invest in a business, unless you figure out how you're going to acquire customers, you're going to go under before you make that £1 million that you want to make. So if you're going to start a business, try and figure out how you're going to get the customer, because you could have the best idea in the world, and just because you've opened the doors or you've actually turned the website on doesn't mean to say that people are going to come to you and spend money at your place, your website, your physical location, whatever. So the single biggest piece of advice I can give to anyone is how are you going to get your message across so that people come and spend money with you? And that's it.
That's really good advice. And thank you for all the advice that you've given throughout. I think really powerful stuff, especially on the, essentially the acquisition cost. And I think we had a little conversation before we started, and that is the main reason businesses fail, isn't it? It's like you said.
It is. And that's the single biggest reason, because lots of people have said to me, why didn't you start FreeServe yourself? And the answer to that is because I did not have that big, massive route to market. Dixons had that route to market. I didn't. I actually had lunch with one of our competitors who'd been bought by British Telecom, and he did it the opposite way to us. He only made a fraction of what we made, and he did the opposite way to us. And when I told him how we did it, he was like, oh my God, we did it the other way around. We spent an awful lot of money on acquiring customers. We spent an awful lot of money on this, that, and the other. So Dixons had that route to market, and that's why it was successful within the first few hours.
Brilliant. I say it's been a phenomenal journey, Ajaz, and one that really is, almost very, very, very hard to replicate. I think, as the success that the business had in such a short period of time was just beyond incredible. Those that listen today and want to find out, more about you or get in touch with you, how would they do so?
Well, you could type in Ajaz Ahmed FreeServe into Google. You'll find out all sorts of information about me. Lots of people have written about me and things like that. But the easiest way, and one of the best ways, is LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a tool that business people should use. I hate it when people use it as social media and they talk about, they've just been on holiday or they've been to see someone. And I don't think LinkedIn was ever intended for that. Write posts and, and share ideas and wisdom and things like that. But if you go onto LinkedIn, you can then connect with me on there. I get an awful lot of people wanting to connect with me, as you can imagine. And I reject most of them because I look at their profile and I think, okay, if I actually accept their connection, then they're going to try and sell me something because I don't know this person. And I look at the business and I think, right, okay, it's going to sell me. They're going to try and sell me what they do, and I don't want that. So if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I'll accept it. So if you remember, just to on the notes, just put on there, I heard your blog or your podcast, then I'll know who you are. But so that's it really. Look on LinkedIn. I've also got a website as well, sosavvy.co.uk, and you'll probably find a connection to that on some of the things on Google as well. That's it. So you can search on Google, sosavvy.co.uk or LinkedIn.
Lovely. And we'll put all those links as well in the show notes as well. So, Ajaz, thank you very much for being a fantastic guest today and telling your story. And I'm sure it will really help a lot of business owners out there who are, either currently thinking about setting up or currently in the midst of the fight, essentially, of growing their own business. So that was another episode of We Built This Business, and we'll be back next Tuesday. Thank you.